3 executives got escorted out in handcuffs that Tuesday morning. I watched it happen from the parking garage, coffee getting cold in my hand, as federal agents walked them past the lobby where I'd signed birthday cards and pretended to laugh at their jokes for 6 years. The CFO, Victor Ashworth, the man who once told me I was lucky to have a seat at the table, he looked right at me through the glass. And I swear, in that moment, he finally understood. The secretary knew the password, and he forgot. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to a fluorescent-lit office in 2019, when I was still naive enough to believe that loyalty meant something. My name is Rachel Medina. For 11 years, I was the executive assistant to the C-suite at Pinnacle Financial Solutions, a mid-sized investment firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. 300 employees, exposed brick in the lobby. The kind of place that put "We're a family" on motivational posters while cutting your dental benefits. I started there at 24, fresh out of community college with an associate's degree and more ambition than common sense. By 35, I'd become what they called institutional memory. I knew where everybody was buried because I'd typed the memos that buried them. Now let me be clear about something. Executive assistant at a financial firm isn't fetching coffee and booking hair appointments. I managed calendars for 4 executives. I drafted correspondence that moved millions of dollars. I sat in on board meetings and took minutes that could have bankrupted the company if they'd ever leaked. I had access to everything. The merger documents, the personnel files, the passwords. Especially the passwords. Victor Ashworth couldn't remember his own mother's birthday, let alone his credentials for 17 different financial platforms. So every quarter, I'd reset them all. I'd store them in an encrypted file that only I maintained. And every quarter, Victor would pat me on the shoulder and say, "What would I do without you, Rachel?" What he meant was, "You're invisible until I need you." Victor had been CFO for 8 years when the new CEO arrived, Patricia Chen. Harvard MBA, McKinsey pedigree. The board brought her in to modernize Pinnacle, which is corporate speak for cut costs and boost quarterly numbers so we can sell to a bigger fish. Patricia was smart, I'll give her that. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, right up until she needed someone to blame. Then you became furniture. I didn't realize I was furniture until the Harrington Account. March 2019. Pinnacle was courting Harrington Manufacturing, a family-owned industrial company looking to restructure their pension fund. $42 million in assets, the biggest potential client we'd had in 3 years. I spent 6 weeks on that pitch. Not officially, of course. Officially, Victor prepared the proposal. But I researched Harrington's board members. I drafted the presentation. I built the financial models from templates Victor couldn't even open without my help. I stayed until 11 p.m. reformatting slides because Victor decided the font looked too aggressive. The night before the pitch, Victor called me into his office. He had that look he got when he wanted something uncomfortable. "Rachel, tomorrow's meeting. I think it's best if you don't attend." I felt my stomach drop. "I'm sorry?" "Patricia wants a lean team, senior leadership only. You understand?" I understood perfectly. Patricia had decided that having the person who actually built the presentation in the room might raise questions about who deserved credit. "Of course," I said, because that's what you say when you're furniture. They landed Harrington. Victor got a $40,000 bonus. Patricia sent a company-wide email praising Victor's exceptional work. I got a $50 gift card to a steakhouse I couldn't afford. That was the first crack, but it wasn't the breaking point. Not yet. Over the next 18 months, I watched Patricia remake Pinnacle in her image. She eliminated the employee wellness program. She outsourced IT support to a company that took 3 days to answer tickets. She restructured the bonus system so that executives got larger percentages while everyone below director level got less. And through all of it, I kept my head down. I kept resetting passwords. I kept taking minutes. I kept being invisible. Now, there's something I haven't told you yet about Patricia, something I discovered by accident in August 2020. But before I get to that, you need to understand what happened with my mother. My mother had a stroke on a Thursday afternoon. I got the call at 2:47 p.m. I remember because I was scheduling Victor's golf weekend when my phone buzzed. The hospital said she was stable but needed immediate surgery. I walked into Victor's office with tears streaming down my face and asked for the rest of the day off. He looked at his calendar, then at me. "Rachel, I have the quarterly board prep tomorrow. Can't your sister handle this?" "I don't have a sister." Right, look, take 2 hours, but I really need those projections formatted before you go." I formatted the projections in the hospital waiting room while my mother was in surgery. Victor sent me 3 emails that night asking about font choices. My mother survived. But something in me didn't. I came back to work 4 days later. No flowers on my desk, no card. Patricia walked past me in the hallway and said, "Glad you're back. Victor's been impossible without you." That was it. That was the acknowledgement I got for 11 years of loyalty. But here's where it gets interesting. Because while I was sitting in that hospital waiting room, formatting Victor's fonts at 11 p.m., I got curious about something. Patricia had scheduled a board meeting for that Friday, the day after my mother's stroke. A meeting that wasn't on the official calendar, a meeting I hadn't been asked to arrange. When I got back to the office, I did some digging. Not obvious digging, just accessing files I had every right to access as executive assistant, looking at calendar entries, cross-referencing emails. And that's when I found it. Patricia had created a shadow company, a consulting firm called Apex Strategic Partners. On paper, it looked legitimate. They provided executive coaching and strategic advisory services to Pinnacle. They'd been billing us $30,000 a month for 18 months. There was just one problem. Apex Strategic Partners didn't exist. No office, no employees, no actual services rendered. The address on file was a UPS store in Delaware. And the bank account receiving those payments? It was controlled by Patricia's husband. $540,000. That's how much Patricia had siphoned from the company I'd given 11 years of my life to. Now, some people would have gone straight to the board, or the police. And honestly, that was my first instinct. But here's the thing about corporate fraud at the executive level. If you don't have airtight evidence, you're not a whistleblower. You're a disgruntled employee with an agenda. Patricia had been very careful. The invoices looked legitimate. The approvals were buried in routine expense reports. And Victor? Victor signed off on every single payment. Whether he knew what he was signing or not, his fingerprints were all over it. I needed more than numbers. I needed proof of intent. I needed someone on the inside who would talk. And I needed leverage. So I started watching and waiting and documenting everything. Let me tell you about Derek Okonkwo. He was the controller, one step below Victor, responsible for actually managing the day-to-day finances. Derek had been at Pinnacle for 15 years. He was meticulous, ethical, and increasingly uncomfortable. I noticed him staying late. I noticed the way he hesitated before signing certain documents. I noticed the bourbon bottle that appeared in his desk drawer around month 3 of Patricia's tenure. One evening in October, I found him alone in the break room, staring at the vending machine like it held the answers to the universe. "Long day?" I asked. He looked at me with the kind of weariness that goes bone deep. "Rachel, can I ask you something? How do you do it?" "Do what?" "Stay sane in this place." He laughed, but there was no humour in it. I used to love my job. Now I feel like I'm, I don't know, complicit in something I don't understand. I sat down across from him. What kind of something? He shook his head. Forget it. I'm just tired. Derek, I leaned forward. You can trust me. I've been here 11 years. I know where every skeleton is buried in this company, and I know when something's wrong. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, The Apex invoices, have you seen them? My heart started pounding. I process all the invoices. Do you know what Apex actually does? Executive consulting, I said carefully. Strategic advisory. Derek laughed again, bitter this time. Yeah, that's what the invoices say. But I've called the number on file. It's disconnected. I looked up their office. It's a mailbox. And the work product we're supposedly paying for? He spread his hands. I've never seen a single document. Not one report, not one presentation. 30 grand a month for nothing. Have you told anyone? Who would I tell? Victor signs off on everything. Patricia approves the budgets. If I go over their heads to the board, I'm accusing the CEO and CFO of fraud with nothing but suspicion. He rubbed his eyes. I've got 2 kids in college, Rachel. I can't afford to be wrong. I made a decision in that moment. A decision that would change everything. What if you weren't wrong? What if you had proof? Now pause for a second. If you were me, would you have trusted Derek? Would you have shown your cards to someone who could just as easily go to Patricia and trade your information for job security? Because what I did next was either the smartest or dumbest decision of my life. I told Derek everything. I showed him the bank records I'd traced, the corporate registration for Apex, the timeline of payments matching Patricia's personal purchases, a vacation home in the Outer Banks, a BMW for her son, a renovation on her primary residence. Derek sat in my living room and went pale. This is real. This is actually real. It's real, but we need more. We need someone to talk. Someone who can prove Patricia knew exactly what she was doing. Derek was quiet for a long moment, then, Victor's assistant, the one before you. Linda? She retired 3 years ago. She didn't retire. Derek looked at me. She was forced out. Non-disclosure agreement, severance package, the whole thing. I processed the paperwork. And I always wondered why Patricia was so eager to make her disappear. Linda Hartley was 62 and living in Asheville when I tracked her down. She'd been Victor's assistant for 9 years before I took over. I drove 3 hours on a Saturday to knock on her door. She didn't want to talk. Not at first. I signed papers. I can't discuss anything about Pinnacle. I'm not asking you to discuss Pinnacle. I'm asking you to look at something. I held up a photo of an invoice. Do you recognize this company? Her face changed. Recognition, fear, and then something harder. Where did you get that? From the same filing system you used to manage. Linda was quiet for a long time. Then she stepped aside. You'd better come in. What Linda told me that afternoon filled in every gap. Patricia had been running the Apex scheme since before she was CEO, since she was COO at her previous company. She'd refined it, perfected it. And when she came to Pinnacle, she simply transplanted the operation. Victor knew. He'd always known. Patricia had cut him in for a percentage. Nothing on paper, just cash payments to an account in his wife's name. That's why he signed everything. That's why he never asked questions. They were partners in theft. Why didn't you report it? I asked Linda. She laughed, hollow and hurt. I tried. I went to Victor first, thought maybe he didn't realize what was happening. You know what he said? I shook my head. He said, "Linda, I've always admired your attention to detail. It would be a shame if that detail-oriented nature got you into trouble you couldn't get out of." Then he smiled, like we were discussing golf scores. She set down her coffee. A week later, HR called me into a meeting, said they were restructuring, offered me a package I couldn't refuse with an NDA attached. And if you hadn't signed? Then suddenly my personnel file would have been full of performance issues no one had mentioned before. Linda met my eyes. They were going to destroy me, Rachel, just like they'll destroy you if you're not careful. That conversation changed something in me. This wasn't just about Patricia and Victor anymore. This was about every Linda, every Derek, every person who'd been used, discarded, threatened, and silenced by people who believed they were untouchable. I was going to prove them wrong. Now, what I found on Victor's laptop, and honestly, this is the part that still gives me chills. If this story is hitting different for you, subscribe, because the cases people send me keep getting wilder. But anyway, I didn't actually access Victor's laptop. Not directly, that would be illegal. What I did was much simpler. I waited for Victor to forget his password. Again, "Rachel, this damn thing locked me out again. Can you work your magic?" I walked into his office just like I had 100 times before. But this time, instead of resetting his password and handing his computer back, I said, "Let me run the diagnostics. There might be a deeper issue. I'll have it back to you in an hour." Victor waved his hand. Fine. I have a lunch meeting anyway." 1 hour. That's all the time I needed. I didn't steal anything. I didn't copy files to a personal drive. That would be traceable, legally questionable, and exactly what they'd expect. Instead, I did something much smarter. I looked for the breadcrumbs. The deleted emails that weren't fully deleted. The calendar entries that had been modified but not purged from the backup logs. The draft folder with messages that were written but never sent. And I found it. I found the smoking gun. An email chain between Patricia and Victor, dated 14 months earlier. The subject line, Apex Adjustment. Patricia's message, "We need to increase the monthly to 40. The offshore transfer for Q2 didn't clear as expected. Make sure this routes through the new approval queue you set up. R doesn't need to see these." R. Sex, 0.3. That was me, Rachel, the person who wasn't supposed to see. Victor's reply, "Done. Also move the auth codes to the secondary file. Only we have access now." I didn't download the emails. I didn't need to. I took photos with my personal phone. Timestamped. Metadata intact. And then I did exactly what Victor expected. I reset his password and returned his laptop before his lunch ended. "All fixed. The diagnostics came back clean." Victor took it without looking up. "You're a lifesaver, Rachel. Don't know what I'd do without you." No, I thought. You really don't. Over the next 3 months, I built the case. I documented everything. The invoices, the shell company, the bank trails Derek helped me trace, Linda's testimony, the email evidence from Victor's laptop. But here's where it almost fell apart. February 2021. I got a text from Derek at 6 a.m. "They know. HR called me in for a routine audit meeting. Tomorrow." My blood went cold. I called Derek immediately. "What exactly did they say?" "Just that Patricia wants to review some financial procedures. But Rachel, the way they asked, something's off. They're suspicious." I'd been so careful, but maybe not careful enough. Maybe Linda had told someone. Maybe Victor had noticed something on his laptop logs. Maybe we'd left a digital fingerprint somewhere we hadn't anticipated. "Listen to me. Don't panic. Go to that meeting, answer their questions, don't volunteer anything, and whatever you do, don't mention me, Linda, or Apex. Can you do that?" Derek went to that meeting. He sat across from Patricia, Victor, and the head of HR. They asked him about expense reports, about approval processes, about whether he'd noticed any irregularities in vendor payments. He told me later that Patricia watched him the entire time with those predator eyes, like she was waiting for him to crack. But Derek held. He'd been doing this job for 15 years. He knew exactly what normal looked like, and he performed normal flawlessly. They let him go with a warning about maintaining proper documentation protocols, but we both knew the clock was ticking. I accelerated the plan. I'd already contacted a forensic accountant, someone Derek knew from his CPA network, someone who'd built cases against corporate fraudsters before. She reviewed everything we had and told me it was solid. "This is textbook embezzlement," she said. "With the email evidence, you've got proof of conspiracy. With Linda's testimony, you've got pattern and motive. With the bank trails, you've got the money. The only question is who you take it to." "The board?" She shook her head. "The board has Patricia's loyalists. Some of them might be complicit. If you go internal, she'll have time to destroy evidence, lawyer up, and turn this into a he said, she said." "Then who?" "The SEC. And the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. You go external. You go nuclear. And you make sure that by the time Patricia finds out, it's already too late." "I want you to understand something. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not entirely. The anger was still there. God, the anger never really left. But somewhere along the way, this had become about something bigger. Every employee Patricia was going to lay off to hide the budget shortfall she'd created. Every corner Derek had been forced to cut because the money wasn't there. Every Linda who'd been silenced, they weren't going to get away with it. Not this time. March 15th, 2021. I walked into the Charlotte field office of the FBI and asked to speak with someone about corporate financial crimes. 3 hours later, I walked out. The wheels were in motion. Now, here's where I need to address something. Some of you might be thinking, Rachel had access to all this information because of her job. Wasn't she technically violating confidentiality? Wasn't she betraying her employer? And to that, I say, my employer betrayed me first. My employer betrayed every honest person who worked there. And there's actually legal protection for employees who report fraud. It's called whistleblower status. My forensic accountant helped me file for it before I ever walked into that FBI office. I wasn't a rogue employee with a grudge. I was a witness to crimes, reporting them through proper channels. What happened next took 4 months of investigation. The FBI subpoenaed Pinnacle's financial records. The SEC launched a parallel inquiry. And throughout all of it, I kept going to work, kept resetting passwords, kept taking minutes. Patricia had no idea. Victor had no idea. They walked past my desk every day, complaining about regulatory paperwork and quarterly projections, completely unaware that I'd already lit the fuse. The hardest part was looking at them, keeping my face neutral when Victor asked me to format another presentation he'd take credit for. Staying silent when Patricia announced a hiring freeze because of market conditions. Conditions she'd created by stealing $500,000. I'm not going to pretend I was a saint. Some nights I lay awake imagining the moment it would all come crashing down. Imagining Victor's face when he realised the secretary he'd dismissed for 11 years had been the one to end him. It was petty. It was human. And I'm not ashamed of it. July 27th, 2021. A Tuesday. I'll never forget that Tuesday. I was already in the parking garage when the federal vehicles pulled up. 5 cars, agents in windbreakers, the kind of arrival that makes everyone in the lobby stop breathing. I watched through the glass doors as they swept into the building. I watched the security guards step aside, unsure what to do. I watched Patricia's assistant, a girl named Megan who'd replaced me on the executive floor, run toward the elevator in a panic. And then I saw Victor. They brought him out first, hands cuffed in front of him, the way they do when they want to minimize the perp walk photos. His face was grey. His eyes were wide. And when he passed the lobby windows, he looked directly at me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched. And for the first time in 11 years, he actually saw me. Patricia came next. She was fighting. Not physically, but verbally. Demanding to call her lawyer. Insisting there had been a mistake. She didn't look at me. She was too busy performing outrage to notice the secretary standing in the parking garage, coffee getting cold. The third arrest was someone I hadn't expected. Thomas Brennan, the VP of Operations. Apparently, his signature had been on more approval documents than I'd realised. He wasn't the mastermind, but he'd been complicit enough to face charges. 3 executives, 3 sets of handcuffs, 3 careers ending on a July morning. The investigation revealed that the total amount embezzled was $847,000, significantly more than my initial estimate. Patricia had been running variations of the Apex scheme through multiple shell companies. Victor's cut had been almost $200,000. The charges included wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and falsifying corporate records. Patricia faced up to 20 years, Victor up to 15. Brennan, who cooperated with prosecutors, received 5 years probation and a permanent ban from serving as an officer in any public company. But here's the part that made it all worth it. Derek was promoted to interim CFO. The board, the ones who weren't immediately forced to resign, brought in an independent auditing firm to review everything. 17 employees who'd been laid off in Patricia's restructuring were offered their jobs back with back pay. And Linda? Linda's testimony was instrumental in the prosecution. Her NDA was voided because you can't enforce non-disclosure of criminal activity. She settled a separate lawsuit against Pinnacle for wrongful termination and walked away with enough money to never work again if she didn't want to. She sent me a card after the sentencing. It said, "Thank you for finishing what I couldn't start." As for me, I stayed at Pinnacle for another 8 months while the company stabilised. The new CEO, an external hire with an actual ethical compass, offered me a promotion. Director of Executive Operations. Triple my previous salary, my own office. I said no. Not because I wanted to punish the company, but because Pinnacle had been my entire identity for more than a decade, and I needed to find out who Rachel Medina was outside those walls. I took a severance package, a generous one after everything I'd done, and I walked away. Victor Ashworth was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. He'll be out in 4 with good behaviour. He lost his CPA licence, his retirement accounts were garnished to pay restitution, and his wife filed for divorce 3 months after the trial. Patricia Chen got 11 years. She's currently in a minimum security facility in Virginia. Her vacation home in the Outer Banks was seized as a proceed of crime. And me? I started a consulting firm. We help companies build internal audit systems and whistleblower protections. Half my clients are small businesses who never want to become what Pinnacle became. The other half are companies that already have, trying to clean up before it destroys them. I'm good at this job. It turns out that 11 years of being invisible taught me exactly how to see everything. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I ever wonder whether I should have just kept my head down, collected my paycheck, and let someone else be the hero. And honestly, for a while, I did wonder. What would have happened if I'd never looked into those Apex invoices? If I'd never talked to Derek in that break room? If I'd just let it go? But then I think about Linda, about the person I would have become if I'd spent another decade pretending not to see. About all the people who did the right thing before me, whose names I'll never know, who made it possible for whistleblower protections to exist in the first place. And I realize we're all connected. Every act of courage makes the next one a little more possible. Every time someone stands up, it makes it easier for the next person to stand. Victor forgot the password, but the secretary? She remembered everything. The stories people send me keep getting wilder. If you want to hear what drops next, subscribe, because some of these I genuinely can't believe are real. And hey, if you've ever had a boss like Patricia, someone who took credit for everything, blamed others for their mistakes, and genuinely believed they were untouchable, I want to hear what happened. What's the most infuriating thing a manager has ever said to you? Because that line Victor gave me, "What would I do without you?" that one still echoes. Until next time.